I'm happy to be joined this morning by John Waters. And for those of you who don't know who John Waters is, he is an Irish thinker. He is a writer and he is also a speaker. John began work as a journalist way back in the last century in 1981 with Hot Press, Ireland's leading rock and roll magazine. He went full time in 1984 when he moved from the Wild West of Ireland to Dublin as a journalist, magazine editor, and columnist. He specialised from the start in raising unpopular issues of public importance. He spent 24 years with the Irish Times as a columnist. He has also published 10 plus books, and he's an aspiring playwright, and he's back to school again, would you believe it or not? And he really does define what a mature student is these days. So without any further ado, a very warm welcome to you, Mr. John Waters. How are you doing?
How are you doing, Rick? I have to correct you on one thing. I'm not an aspiring playwright. I'm a former playwright wishing to reboot myself. Because I wrote plays back in the 90s. I had a kind of a dream of getting out of journalism. Because, I've always called myself as a kind of an artist manqué, that was in the wrong hole, and the journalism wasn't quite where I wanted to be. And that's probably a little bit of a kind of a snobbiness of mine as well, because we can go into this, like the whole idea of writing and the layers of sort of hierarchy of how would you call it, grandeur, a hierarchy of grandeur in terms, where you have your poet at the top, you have your novelist, your playwright. I'm not sure where that shakes down, and then the bottom is the journalist, but Tom Wolfe kind of debunked that idea with his new journalism and created a form of journalism that was really as creative, if not more so in some respects, than the novel. But I tried to be a playwright. I wanted to be a playwright, and I actually did very, very well. My first play got an award, the Stuart Parker Award. You'd know about him up in the north. He was a northern playwright. He died very young, and so on. And I then wrote some plays for the BBC. RTE wouldn't stage my plays. Wouldn't even talk to me. That's the way this little republic of ours is and always has been, really, I guess. But I want to reboot myself because I feel that I've been writing an awful lot in the last 6 years about what, and I've had a book out about it, and I've loads of more material. I've written millions of words, like millions, literally. I say like maybe 4 million, something like that. Absolutely, more words than I wrote in all of the previous part of my career or life or whatever you call it. I don't like the word career. Careerism. So I want to go back to it now, and it's really working because I'm actually doing two courses kind of parallel. One is what they call creative practice, which is a generic kind of concept about creativity and the work of the artist and the methods you use, which I find very interesting. I'd never heard of it before. And also I'm doing a playwriting course because as what they call an auditor. I just sit in on the class, but I find that really useful. So I'm kind of getting back, and I'm trying to imagine myself writing a play. We won't go into it too much because it's going to cut across our attention with this discussion. But it's kind of like to find a way of writing about what's going on in the world that isn't kind of preachy, that isn't messaging, that it's actually a drama of real people and their real lives. So that's kind of my ambition. Actually, this morning, I'm going to show you. I'll disappear for 10 seconds.
Go for it. Go for it. And for those that are listening in, I want this to be an inspirational. If people are listening into this conversation, I want them to be inspired. So I know many people out there maybe come across this because of the title on it and the fact that it'll be on YouTube. It'll be to do with writing and expression, creative expression. So the aim is to move people closer to acting that out rather than just thinking about it and taking it to the grave with them. Sorry, John. What have you got there?
My wife came across this morning. I couldn't believe it. I don't know where she found it, but it's a poster from one of my plays from back in the 90s called Easter Jews, which is produced by Bickerstaff in Kilkenny back in, I think, 1997, something like that. So there you are. There's the proof, and that's what I want. But I love the theatre. I don't go to it as much as I used to because it's become very kind of affected societally. It's kind of like where the grown people go, for the opening night, and you could meet all kinds of creeps at that, like Joe Duffy or someone like that, and it wouldn't improve your mood, Joe.
No.
So I gave up going. I think I'm off the list now, anyway.
Yeah.
But
Well, in relation to your writing, John, when I introduced you here, normally you and I have spoke many, many times on other platforms, many times, and normally I only use 3 words to introduce you or describe you. The first one is a thinker, the second one is a writer, and the third one is a speaker. Okay, and then we usually get into a conversation about a topic. And purposely today, I wanted to find out a little bit more about you as John Waters, the man, and how that manifests itself in writing. Because there's a famous quote that's been twisted several times that goes along the lines of everyone has a book in them. For example, everyone has a book in them, but that's no use unless it's pried out. And I think it was Christopher Hitchens twisted that a little bit. He said everyone has a book in them, and for many people, that's exactly where it should stay. So on the topic of people having having books in them, or in your case, at this point, a play or 2 more in them, or a poem in them. How do you move, John? How do you move from sitting in your chair, mulling stuff over, looking out the window, mulling stuff over, to saying, right, I'm gonna start something. I'm gonna put pen to paper. I'm gonna put my fingers to keyboards. I mean, is it a case of you just start and then you go with it, or is there a plan involved beforehand?
Okay. Well, this is a big one, Rick, a really big one, because there's different categories, and they're very important. I mean, first of all, just to kind of preface this, because I want to get to a core point, which is about the unconscious. Just to remind, if I don't mention the unconscious, call me out. But there are different categories, of writing, and say, like writing nonfiction, what you could call journalism, essays, that kind of stuff. It's a different process to other forms of writing, creative writing, let's say. So, yeah, I mean, that's just about, that kind of writing is essentially about getting an idea and developing it in your head, keeping notes and starting to write, to construct. And then the great thing about the modern technology is that you kind of don't have to know everything about it when you start. You can write a first sentence that might never end up in the article. So you just keep going. And all I say to people is just sit down and write. Write what's in your head. Just write everything that's in your head, and then sort it out afterwards. And then maybe redo that process and do some more research and then work that in. So that's a fairly straightforward process. Creative writing has different layers. First of all, playwriting is very interesting because it's sort of a bridge between the 2 forms, because Arthur Miller famously said that all plays are social. And I guess with that he meant 2 things. One was that, it happens in a social context, in a theatre, with a community in front of it called the audience. And therefore you're playing, when you're playing the play or when you're writing it, you're speaking to an audience that is visible. The other thing is, if you think about the word playwriting, it's very interesting because it's not spelled Playwriting. It's Wrighting, playwriting. And that's a different thing. And that's really opposite because, okay, you do sit in a room at a desk and write the script. But the construction of the play is a building exercise. You route it. It's routed. It's not written purely. And it's more and more in the modern world, it's become a very collaborative art form. I mean, one time, the greats of Irish playwriting, for example, Brian Friel and Tom Murphy, like they would write their script and they would one morning deliver to the Abbey Theatre. And if there was a requirement to change one comma of that, they had to, the theatre, the director would actually have to ask the playwright if it was okay if I put a pause in there or whatever. Literally almost that much. But that's gone now. Way gone, because they were great men. You could do that with men like that, with playwrights like that. But a lot, people are learning and they're on the job, they're collaborating with dramaturgs and directors, and also actors. Actors can improvise around a certain idea. So it's a very interesting thing in that respect. Although there are limits to that also, because at a certain point the playwright can get lost in the whole thing, and suddenly at the end of the thing you see a play on the stage that has nothing to do with what you started out with, and that happens. So, but then the more private writing, novel writing, and I've tried it, and I'm not very good at it. I don't think I haven't given up. I have written a draft of a novel, but I'm not happy with it, and I'm almost afraid to look at it now. I pass by it occasionally and look down at it out of the corner of my eye, and say, "Yeah, you're still there," But I'm going to have to deal with it soon, because I don't want to leave it lying around for people to kind of, poke about with after I'm gone, and say, yeah. "Oh, God, wasn't he terrible?" So if it's as bad as I suspect it might be, I'm going to have to destroy it, Rick. So that's the job for some not too distant day. But the most interesting, you see, Rick, this the unconscious. Like that there are literally millions of books about how to write. And I would say that virtually none of them is worth anything except probably two. One is Stephen King's book, which is really good for telling you how not to write.
Yeah. On writing, really I think it's called, isn't it? On writing.
Yeah. He tells you what not to do, So don't say he guffawed. Just say he said. And if he's guffawing, you kind of have to communicate that in some other way. It's kind of like things like that. It's good though. And now the other one is a woman called Dorothea Brand, and her method is the most amazing thing I've ever come across, because it's a book that is absolutely, if I was recommending a single writing book, that is it. It's called Becoming a Writer. And what she says is that to answer your question absolutely directly in this context, she says you get out of bed in the morning when you wake up. You don't do anything else. You have a place prepared, a desk, a chair. Everything is there. You don't make yourself a cup of coffee. You do nothing. If you want coffee, have it made the night before and drink it cold. You go to the place and you sit there. And this point about going there immediately is that you're in the liminal state. You're still in a slightly in dream world. And she says you wait for something to come. And if nothing comes the first day, you stay there for 2 hours. Nothing comes, okay, leave it. But the next day you do exactly the same thing. You sit and you wait for something to come. And if it can take 1,000 days, you do that. But then on one day, maybe the 1,027th day, something comes and you start to write it as it comes. And then you find that thereafter it continues to come. And the point here is this, that what she's telling us is that the unconscious needs to be assured that it's what it tells you will be made use of. In other words, it's not going to go to waste. And once it comes, she says, it is like training your unconscious like an animal to deliver its contents when you need them. And she goes through that process, and then she creates and talks about doing another session in the afternoon, the same thing, after a while. And I tried that with my novel writing, and it did work. I mean, I didn't really, I think, get right into it, because I find it hard to find it hard to work without having a cup of tea or something, and I did that for a while, but then I started to cheat, and that probably didn't help. But it's a brilliant book and a brilliant method. I think it does work, and I think lots of. I think Kevin Barry. Somebody told me Kevin Barry uses this. The Irish novelist, brilliant Irish novelist. He uses this method, and you can tell because he goes to a different place in his books. The voices, the personalities, they're not normal people. Tom Murphy used to do that. Tom Murphy the playwright. He told me about his method one time, and it was astonishing. He described to me like a summer's day, the sun beating down outside, and he would be in the living room. He would have pulled the curtains. He would be sitting there, and he would have had Maria Callas on the turntable, on the record player, and he would be drinking wine. and he'd have the notepad and the pencil in his hand, and that's how he used to write.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, he said, sometimes, occasionally, you hear the laughter of children in the garden. You speak like that, in the garden, children, life. And here I am, making black marks on white pieces of paper.
Yeah.
You know?
That's an interesting. You mentioned his method, okay, because you used the example of that lady being very disciplined, getting up first thing in the morning, going straight to the keyboard or the typewriter in a sort of semi-dream state and waiting there until inspiration arrived. And you mentioned this chap, this playwright, he would have certain music on, he would be sipping on a glass of wine, and then inspiration would come. I was reading or watching some interviews with Charles Bukowski recently as well, and I mean his method of writing that came late in life. He wrote a lot of poems, a lot of short stories. He was rejected hand over fist for years. He got a soul-destroying job in an American post office. He thought, this is my life now. He was an alcoholic. He wasn't going to get anywhere. And then a man came to him and said, listen, I've read some of your short stories and poems. I'll pay you $100 a month if you quit your job and become a writer, and I'll take a percentage of any future royalties of any books that you may publish. And at that point, he had nothing to lose. So he went for it. And his method was he began writing in the evening times. He would drink to the early hours. He would sleep in late. He would get up. He would have another drink. Then he would sit, very disciplined though, at his keyboard. And he would have music playing, maybe some jazz music playing, and he would drink a beer, because he said if he drank spirits, that was he said, I need to be drunk to be writing. He says, but if I drink spirits, I get drunk too quickly. So my writing sessions don't last more than an hour. So he would sit and sip on beer for a long time and, become progressively more wasted, but still typing.
Yeah.
And really, the point that he was trying to make was, listen, put out everything that's in your head. You alluded to that as well. Put out everything that you're thinking, type it all out there, and then you can always go back to that and tidy that up in the editing process. But the most important thing is to get output out of your head through your fingers and onto your keyboard. I think that's a universal approach that every writer would agree on. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I think that's that is it. That's the method. And, but, it's not just about, as it were, writing in the sense of, mechanical process, an instrumental process of, thought onto page. It's a question also of delving. And this is something Murphy did all the time. Like Murphy would actually create whole languages out of Ireland past. Like he wrote a play called Famine, which went back, 175 years now. He discovered the voices. He created the voices. Now, I don't know whether he discovered them or created them, but they were authentic. They sounded. Ballygungoira, this amazing play he wrote, is one of his greatest. He had this capacity. Ivor Brown, the psychiatrist, who was a great friend of his, and he wrote an essay about him once saying that he had invented languages possibly never existed. They were dialects of English that possibly never existed. And that was in the immersion of that condition in the darkened room with the wine and the music, that he got to those places in himself. And that's all part of the writing, as it were. The other thing I would say, though, about the drink thing, I would definitely warn people that,
I'm not advocating. I'm just saying in that one example,
no,
that's what made him.
It can be a lubricant. But I think, as you said, like once Bukowski got to a certain point, he was too pissed to write anymore. And I think that the truth of it is that very rarely can it be said like that. Like lots of writers have mythological kind of legends about their drinking, like Brendan Behan or Dylan Thomas. But if you actually look closely at their lives, they were extraordinarily disciplined in their actual writing. They didn't write while they were drunk. And if they did, they didn't come up with very much. So it's a myth. There's a myth there attaching to that. But maybe the hangover state isn't a bad place to write. You distorted kind of altered vision, I think would be maybe constructive. But Dylan Thomas in particular, I think he was an amazing writer because he would actually quite happily in these day of maybe 3-4 hours working with just one line. one finish line. Like, you know, and that's probably, you know, it's an amazing thing. Like John McGahern also said that when you're writing creatively, and I think this is absolutely true, 2 hours a day is a long day to work for that kind of rate, because you're really going into yourself, you know, and it's not a superficial, like journalism can be, not always, but it doesn't have to be, but it can be quite a superficial thing. You're just, you know, processing information. I remember once actually in the Irish Times, there was a particular editor. He was a page editor, op-ed editor, we used to call them. And I used to go deal with him, you know, and one time I was in his office and we were talking about different columns and whatnot. And I used the phrase writing. I used the word writing in relation to some other writer who's a good writer. He just looked at me and he said, John, he said, journalists are processors of information, nothing else. And I said, right, okay, gotcha. But that's the death of journalism, as it is the death of civilization. And now we're in it. Because when you bring in people who are only capable of processing information, without imagination, without poetry, you're screwed. Your whole civilization.
That's where AI is rising up at the minute.
Yeah.
Don't you find? It's taking the humanity and the nuance away from an individual style of writing, and that's the sad thing too, actually, because I'm talking about style of writing. If I fed all of your books into an AI program, I don't use it myself. I'm trying to avoid it like the plague, but I know it's at the level whereby if I took a transcript of your 10 odd books, your previous published plays, all your journalistic endeavors, put them all into a machine and said, write me an article in the style of John Waters about this topic, it will probably spew out something that's close enough to the mark. Granted, it's something that's currently being refined week in, week out. It's getting better and better at what it does. But this removal of individuality and this removal of personal style and this removal of, you know, flow or specific topics that you may be very, very passionate about that I maybe couldn't care less about, and vice versa. If I was to write a book, that's all being removed and replaced very quickly with artificial forms. How do you feel about that at this stage of your writing?
I got to tell you that it's already happening. I mean, I've actually been writing to Meta, which is the Facebook operation, Zuckerberg and that, and they've been pirating. I've discovered that some of my books have been, as they say, scraped for their AI. Their Llama, I think, is their new AI, and they're working on that. So there's a case going on now with the Society of Authors, which I'm a member of in the UK, against them to try to challenge what they're doing, because I believe that's actually, you know, it's not, they're fighting it on the basis of copyright, but that's not even the point. It's plagiarism, because they're plagiarizing not your literal words, not your sentences, not your necessarily, but your very essence as a writer, your method, which is visible in the entrails of your work, and they're then trying to reconstruct that. Well, I think that's quite a sinister development, obviously, but I actually think it's going to be a very short-lived one, because at a certain point it'll be a novelty for a while, and they'll be able to churn out novels quickly. They're already actually happening. It's happening. You know, I've discovered now some friends of mine have books out, and within days of their book appearing, there's another book which is like an analysis of the book, which plagiarizes all the important parts of it, and then presents it as an analysis, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's on Amazon, and it's all over the place. You can get a Kindle of it and whatever. So I don't. But I do think that at a certain point, you know, people will become starved of something and they won't know what it is.
Yeah.
Some essence of reading this stuff. You know, you can see it already in the way that AI is. Now, obviously, it's moving very fast, and it's developing very fast, and it's amazing in some respects. I mean, to have conversations with this is quite astonishing. But you do notice certain things. And one of the things you notice is that there's a kind of a wall on what it's capable of telling you. That it doesn't really go beyond the axiomatic. It's good at sort of gathering stuff together that's available, but it doesn't go beyond. It has no imagination, unexpectedly, you know, well, and it has no creativity really. So I don't know if that can be amended
Mhm.
in a certain sense. When you dumb the human race down, you can make them, and they have done. I mean,
Mhm.
there's no doubt about it that the average, I would say, even in the West, is much lower than it was in the 60s or
Yeah.
70s when people were sharp, they were ironic, they were,
Mhm.
they understood paradox, they understood all kinds of things.
Mhm.
They couldn't possibly accept the kinds of things like cancellation for nonsense that we're accepting now. The Enoch Burke thing could not have happened in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, or the 90s, and that kind of thing. But I think it's going to be short-lived. I hope it is, because, my daughter is now a writer,
Mhm.
and she's very good, and I would like to think she has a career. She's had a daughter. I have a granddaughter now, and she'd probably be a writer as well. I hope
Mhm.
so, and because it's a great way to be. It's a great way of being, because you're actually free in the world. I mean, what other people call work, you call something else.
Yeah, it's the love of your life.
Yeah, yeah.
On that note, just a couple of things that you brought up there. I also think, I don't know what it is, if it's people are almost craving nostalgic things. The, the way that society has gotten these days, with, for example, just using AI for example, the lack of authenticity, and you can also spot, if someone's faking it very quickly now, because if you use social media, for example, I've seen a lot of guys that can hardly string a sentence together, and girls too. And me, I don't use it, but I'm not the most best person with regards to grammar and punctuation. But all of a sudden, they're producing very slick, bullet pointed, cross referenced posts, and they're posting it up there. And you can tell it's
Oh
not
yeah.
their work. They've fed something into some kind of chat GPT program, and it's spewed out something. And another guy I'm friends with, who is a good writer, but he was producing so much content. And I said to him, I want to say what his name is. I said, man, you're really working hard at that. I mean, you've got these posts coming out every day. He says, I just take 3 articles, I feed them into a program, I ask them to give me a summary, it spits it out, I tell it I want it to be 2,000 words. It does 2,000 words, and I upload it onto my
Oh,
blog. He says, I know it's cheating. He says, but it gets it out there. But I could tell there was just something up, or there was something off. And even with ads, you see a lot of adverts these days for different, programs that they want you to install onto your phone or computer. And I can remember a year or so ago, there was one kept popping up called Grammarly. And
oh yeah.
initially it was, we'll make sure, we put all the right full stops and semicolons and colons. We'll punctuate everything really well. That has now evolved to the point whereby it says, we'll write your emails for you based on your communication with John
Oh,
Waters in the past. Do you want this to be professional? Do you want to change the tone? Do you want it to be more friendly? Do you want it to be more direct? Do you want it to be this? So, it takes a lot of the thinking process, what you would have learned as basics in school, when you were learning English and you were learning how to read and write and all that business, punctuate, grammar, all that's completely gone out the window now. And I
yeah.
think there's a big dumbing down going on, and I
There
think
is.
people can see it and they don't like it.
Oh, 100%. Well, there's two things I would say. First of all, I'm reminded of the fact that Word, the word processing for the
Mhm.
program, I mean, they constantly do this to you when you're writing on Word, where they underline certain passages and they say this could be expressed in a better way, and you say "fuck off." Uh, you know, uh, would you like? I think it's called. They call it co-pilot. Pilot. Would
Right.
you like co-pilot to rewrite this sentence for you?
Mhm.
This kind of stuff, like and so that's going to remove all idiom, all kind of individuality, eccentricity. Any makey up words, which are a great part of writing and have been,
Mhm.
going back millennia.
Mhm.
That's where language comes from. You make up new words because there doesn't seem to be one, or you don't know what it is for what the precise purpose you wanted, and you make it up. So that's one thing I think that definitely, you know, is a very sinister development. But the other thing I was going to say is that, and I've said this a few times before, that something has happened to writing as a result of the internet, as a result of social media in particular, where it's purely a kind of a perfunctory process of exchanging views.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no, it's a kind of like, it's kind of like ordinary speech written down,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't a bad idea in some respects. If you're writing a play, it can be good for certain characters. But what I mean is that there's no complexity in it. There are no layers. There's no paradox. There's no irony. There's no kind of uh, um, alliteration, for example, things that actually have been used through the ages by writers to achieve certain kind of effects, which maybe they don't even understand what they are when they're doing it. They just know that there's a particular poetic resonance to this that is exactly what the feeling I want to communicate. Nobody writes a tweet like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think nobody writes a social media, a Facebook post like that, and as a result, that's contaminating the mainstream of public writing and therefore a public thought, and has a lot to do, I think, with the reductionism that is occurring in relation to just simple ideas and their absurdities that are now manifesting in lots of ways, where you get, I mean, like, for example, I was at a couple of plays up in Belfast last week, and before the plays, one of them was like about the end of the world. It's quite a good play, with some reservations. It's called Denouement, and it's about the end of the world, a moment at the end of the world with a couple in a room talking about their lives. But the playwright, the thing before they came, this immense, on my email came this immense kind of trigger warning that there were explosions. Beware.
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel upset, just go outside and the cafe will be open and speak to a member of staff, and all this kind of stuff,
In Belfast, of all places.
Yeah, exactly. There might be more explosions outside than there are in the actual theater. Well, not anymore, thank God. But you know what I mean? For the sake of the joke,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. And that's serious. Like, they're actually afraid that people will actually go boom and then complain. Wow. Now the sound, I have to say, one of the great things about that play is the sound effects are absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
You do feel you're actually it's nuclear war and you're in it, and that's great. But it's so funny, like that our culture has become so reduced. And we've said this a few times in different contexts, as if everything's going backwards rather than forwards now. Things are getting worse, regressing again. That it's like it's almost we, at some unconscious level in our consciousness or unconsciousness, we decided that we'd gone as far as we can. That sense of, well, I've walked 14 miles now, so I'm going to just turn around at the next crossroads.
Yeah.
And we've hit that crossroads, and now we're on the way back to wherever we came from.
Do you feel that, the description, again, I go back to the three words that I've always used to introduce you in the past, right? First one of which was thinker. Okay. Second one of which was talker. And the third one of which was writer. And those are from your own Substack page. That's how you would self-describe yourself. And I was wondering, is there some kind of a subconscious coming out of you in how you describe yourself? You don't describe yourself as a writer, a talker, and a thinker. You describe yourself as a thinker, a talker, and a writer. And would it be fair to say that without the process of thought, there is no meaningful speech, and without the process of thought, there are no meaningful words? There's a lot of people nowadays that have been given a platform or give themselves a platform, for example, on social media, whatever platform that may be, whatever, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, whatever it happens to be, and they have a default platform. They build up a following, in inverted commas, and without any actual thought, people are just spewing garbage out of their mouths. They're just clickbaiting. There's no substance. There's no depth. There's no chapters. There's no plot. There's no characters. There's no script. It's just bunkum dumped online, and it's being done to the tune of not just one or two millions, if not billions of people are partaking in this daily. And then that becomes our consumption. Rather than reading a good, well-crafted book or going to see a good, well-crafted play, you're bombarded now from morning to night with unstructured, unfathomable
Yeah.
tripe from begin. That has a negative effect on your brain too.
Well, I think that has a hugely negative effect on the brain of society, if you can think of such a thing.
Yeah.
It's the law of diminishing returns is at work all the time, and you're in this downward spiral of originality and or lack of thereof. And I think there's a very interesting kind of equation to be seen there in the context of the writer, the artist, the commentator, the poet. Those functions have a very important historical role in our society, which are part of the thinking process. And that's where thought originates, really. That's you often wonder, like, who writes the jokes. Well, the guys who write the jokes are important too. We don't even know their names, but somebody writes those jokes that we hear and we spread around to each other. So if people stop creating those things, we're in trouble. And or poems or plays or whatever, and songs. And there's this kind of downward spiral in play now, I think, that is quite ominous, because all of this is simply cannibalizing what's already there. This social media stuff. It's just regurgitating. When I was writing, I stopped doing Twitter. It's still up there somewhere, but I stopped because I was doing spent a lot of time with. I did one tweet a day for about 6 months last year. I was in the election. That was partly the reason, or mainly the reason why I went on against my will. But I used to spend a lot of time on it, thinking, like, to try to think. And an original, what I hoped was an original idea would occur to me, and I would write it and then try to compress it into this space. And it was kind of like, you'd be like almost like writing a haiku, like it wasn't, that was the kind of sense I had. And that isn't the general experience of Twitter or social media, to be fairly, to understate things a little bit. But that's so important, because you see, there's this thing about thinking. Society can't think as society, and yet it must have a conversation if it is to survive. If a civilization is to survive, it must be having conversations all the time. And they come from individual people talking, but they must think. So there's this strange paradox that, in a certain sense, the individual must think before speaking, before writing, in order to create the conversation. For the society, which only thinks after the fact, which then thinks as a consequence of all of these other contributions, and develops a different kind of thinking, which is not the same. It's not thinking. It doesn't think and then say something. Society doesn't think and say something. There's all this saying, all this writing, and then out of that, society thinks, and hopefully it thinks more accurately, more germanely, more humanely, whatever, as a result. And that process is now being completely screwed up by the way things are on the internet, which has killed that initial impulse where you feel, when the poet sits down to write a poem, it's a poem that's been working around his head for maybe months. And it's, it's at the end of a process. It's not like just spat out. It may be spat out in the actual moment, but it's been gestating for a long time. And the same is true of novels. The same is true of plays, even great articles, great essays, But we're now in a sort of a telegrammatic kind of culture where everything is just bish, bosh, bash, dum, 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 dum.
Day in, day out.
Yeah.
Day in, day out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that has a finite life in any kind of, in terms of being of any use, whatever, to the civilization. In fact, it has probably already started to be destructive.
Yeah, I think so, John. I mean, like you mentioned, just going back a little bit, you mentioned 2 books, that would be beneficial for someone to read. One, Stephen King on writing, because it tells you what not to do. The other one, what was the name of that lady you were telling?
Becoming a Writer.
Right, and what was her name?
Dorothea Brande.
Right.
Brande. There's an E on the end of it. Brande.
So Dorothea Brande's method was to get up, to go to a place of writing, and to be disciplined, not to get up and leave until an idea came, or if it hadn't came, you keep going back to that place of solitude and focus. the social media. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm someone who's partaken in things and seen things develop over the last few years, both to my benefit and to my detriment, I might add. And I don't know about you, but I feel my attention span has been shot to bits over the last few years because of immersion in fast firing, constant, ever evolving, changing, bombarded from all directions, from multiple opinions. It's the point now where I can't even sit through a full length movie. It's a 2 hour movie. I have to break it into two parts. I would struggle to sit and watch something for more than 30 minutes, or to sit and read. I mean, there's a bookcase behind me full of great books that I've started yet to start to read yet, which is a sin. And I feel
Yes.
some of it is because of this social media bombardment, but also on the writing side. Let me just throw this in too. You know, I have something that I'm working on at the minute, and it exploded in creativity at the start of this year, and it has stalled as I've been building up another YouTube channel that then it got put to the side. But the only time that I have sat and took a pen and a piece of paper and written with discipline and productivity is when I haven't been in Ireland. Okay. There was a period of 11 years where I traveled back and forth several times a year to East Africa. I was doing some stuff out there. There was no internet. There was no electricity where I stayed. There was no running water. It was village life in the bush. And literally all I had was I brought pens and paper, and I tried to journal every day that I spent when I was there. And every morning when I woke up, and you would wake up at 5 with the roosters crowing and, you know, the hustle and bustle of the village, you had no option. You had to get up early as the sun was coming up. I found a
Yes.
place wherever I was staying, a little solitude, a little altar of writing, maybe up the side of a chicken house, maybe under a tree somewhere that no one knew where it was. And I would sit on a little stool with my A4 spiral notebook and my little black, you know, thick pen. And I would write and write and write and put down everything that I'd experienced in the previous 24 hours, my thoughts on it, my feelings, etc. And I've unearthed a block of about 12, maybe 14 full A4 journals that I've written over the between 2007 and 2019 that I know I need to do something with.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't have been removed, I couldn't have done that in where I live at the minute because of too many distractions, I feel. And really, I suppose what I'm trying to say is that all this technology, people think it's a wonderful thing. People think it's moving us forward. People think it's helping with civilization and so on and so forth. Without being an old stickler or trying to be a contrarian, I don't. I believe it's putting the handbrakes and the foot brakes on us in many ways, especially when it comes to creativity and focus. Am I too doom and gloom about that, or what do you
No, no,
think?
you're. I think you've described a very real situation there, Rick. It's really that's it, and it's. I think it's very general. Other than with writers who are specifically oriented for a certain discipline and medium, uh, and maybe a project, that they don't even live in the same world as us, which is necessary for them. Well done, good
Mhm,
luck, you know. Because,
mhm,
but yeah, I find that too. I mean, there are ways out of it, I think. And one of the reasons that I took on this course I'm doing in Sligo in ATU, creative practice, is to actually find a way to break that, because in the nature of the work I've been doing, I'm constantly, you know, paying attention
mhm,
to everyday events and reading things and watching things and trying to, and they're processing all the time, because I do a weekly diary on my Substack
mhm,
on a Friday, and it's like it start I when I started off, Rick, I had this idea of making it a little bit like the Spectator diary, you know, which I used to like. I like the Spectator. I used to like it a
mhm,
lot more, maybe. But you know, it's about 1,200 words, and I thought that's about right, you know. So it was kind of an extra bonus for my paid subscribers. It's now, last week it was 11,000 words.
mhm.
You know, like in a month I have a book of diaries every month, pretty much. I have 50,000 words. Like, so I'm processing a lot of material, and that's one of the things what you've just described there. I'm very conscious that that's, for all that it's in a certain sense I feel necessary, and that's a hard thing to explain, but I believe it, for history, for posterity, for everything, that there's a record, if that emotional record or whatever of this. But at the same time, it is limited. It's not what I want to do fundamentally. I hoped this whole thing would stop a long time since, and that we could go back to being ourselves. And that's kind of one of the reasons that I persuaded myself, or was persuaded by a series of events, because I've tried to get away from journalism several times over the course of my life in it, for all kinds of reasons, not unrelated to what you've saying there, that tendency. And it has pulled me back, or I've been pulled back by God, the universe, or whatever, say, no, this is your job. And I do think there's something there, that we live in a moment when the art forms are no longer adequate to doing the job they did through the ages.
Yeah.
You know, that the poets are not standing up. There's no Shakespeare to write stories that are actually both human and, in a certain sense, sociological. I'm sure he'd be deeply insulted by that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like Arthur Miller saying, all plays are social, and that's precisely what he meant it. I think in that sense, that they're about our lives together, and about what we are inside in that context, and what it means, and how we relate. And man, I think his plays are amazing. I've always loved Miller's plays. So that's something I kind of feel is something I need to. I mean, I'm getting on now, Rick. I'm 70, so I need to get my act together if I'm going to do something that would kind of finish, put a little flourish on the end of what I've been doing. Shall we say?
Funny you bring that up, right? Funny you bring that up, because I was gonna touch on your age, in for no other reason than this, that another great motivator to get stuff done is, if you have a sense of urgency, or something's, if you have a deadline to meet. For example, if you have to make a mortgage payment by the end of the month and you don't have the money there and it's 2 weeks away, there'd be an urgency there behind you to get some cash together, or to keep, the bailiffs from the door, to keep the wolves from the door. In a creative sense, you mentioned this actually earlier on. I don't know if maybe you did this subconsciously or unconsciously, but you talked about this novel that you have kicking around, and you need to go back and revisit it, because if you don't do that and you pop your clog, someone else might come along and put it out. You're thinking, oh, I want to just burn that. I don't want that to be released without it being done right. But if I die, someone else might get that. The last time we spoke, the last time you and I spoke about other things, you mentioned going to a certain place in Ireland. You were driving through a certain place, and you actually said to me, you said, I wonder, is that the last time I'll ever be in that place? That was quite an odd thing to say. And we talked about a washing machine, or a tumble dryer that I had just bought. I said the last one lasted me for 25 years. I got it when I was 27. I'm now 52. If this one lasts me as long as it will, I'll be nearly 80 by the time it goes through. So maybe subconsciously, when we're talking about mortality, or this is in the back of our minds, maybe that's a big driving force as well, as people become more aware that the time is running out, and there's only so much time you can devote to certain things. There's things that you want to leave behind, because a book is a great thing, because it doesn't matter if you're alive or dead. People can still read it, benefit from it, and be inspired by it. Is there an element, whether subconsciously or more consciously or not, that, and listen, I could die today, so could you. Or you could live to your 100, but still, is that sort of like the fact you can feel the flame, not the fires of hell, but flames licking at your back, driving you forward to be more active at this stage, writing 11,000 words instead of 1,000 words, churning out the equivalent of a novel every month in diary format? Is that maybe your driver?
Well, yeah, that's right. It is undoubtedly that. I mean, Rick, that in the early part of our lives appear to be infinite.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no point in telling a teenager, you know, that life is short. He just thinks you're crazy. What's that mean? You know, I can go. I remember actually going to, when I went the very first day, I went to Dublin to work on Hot Press on the 1st of May 1984. And I remember having the express thought that if I could get 30 years out of it, I'd be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's like 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago. And I'm still going. I'm still not happy, in a sense. I'm not happy in that sense that I'm content with everything I've done and that I've done enough and whatever. And it's not necessarily, it is to some extent leaving things behind, but it's not for your reputation, because my reputation is pretty shot anyway, you know.
So for some people, but again, but let's take that. Perspective's a very important thing there too. There's a lot of people think you are the devil incarnate, and other people think you could probably walk on water if you put your mind to it, you know. So there's an interesting, if you look at perception as well, it really depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah, yeah, I guess there's something in that. But at the same time, you know, you kind of, it's a different thing, you know. You're not necessarily trying to build a plinth for yourself, you know, to be, you know, a literary career, a literary giant or anything like that. It's that you want to leave evidence behind of things that you saw that you're not sure anybody else saw.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And that's a process. You can't just write them down like a shopping list. You have to live in them and around them in order to discover them in their full complexity. Now, it's a funny thing you said about, you know, burning the books and all that. Yeah, I was reminded actually, you know, for some reason, well, for obvious reasons in a way, but not because I'm comparing myself to him, of Franz Kafka, who left the trial, among other books, I think America, behind, and with instructions to his agent, Max Brod, that they be burned. Right? Mm-hmm. Brod actually disobeyed his master because he read the books and think, I'm not destroying these books. I'm not doing it. So, you know, that's an amazing thing. We wouldn't have the trial other than for that. And the trial is possibly, you know, it's arguably the most incredible book about the things that are happening in the world now, totalitarianism, has ever been written. The first sentence, and it's all condensed into the first sentence. It's the most amazing thing. You know, the sentence is a capsule of the whole book, because it reads, somebody must have been telling lies about Joseph K, because without having done anything wrong, he was arrested one morning. Whoa, what a sentence.
Prophetic
what a
almost.
Sentence. You know, and so I do think there is pressure, and also because I want to write to write a play, another play, one more at least, which somehow kind of, because those guys, Kafka and Orwell and Huxley to some extent, although I don't like Brave New World so much, but other guys as well, wrote about this, you know, condition, and I want to kind of catch it now at a point where perhaps there's new developments, there's new trends, new tendencies, new strains in the mix, and I want to do that. And I've been doing it for the last few couple of months now. And I actually I staged a scene from my play, from my putative play. It's not written yet. This is the first scene, and we put it on in the Yates building in Sligo last week. It's only 10 minutes, but other students were doing their own things in different parts of the building. And it was really interesting because I based it on the opening of the trial, where there's an arrest. And the key moment from that whole episode is in the trial is where the arresting officers sit down at Joseph K's table in his apartment and eat his breakfast. And that seems to me to be so opposite in the time we're living through now, because it's the state reaching into your very gut and wrenching it for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do. And I think I can do it. As I said at the beginning, I've always felt that I'm an artist manqué, because even though I'm not particularly great at anything, I can play the harmonica. My biggest fan now is my granddaughter, but she's only 5 months,
Yeah.
and she becomes mesmerized when I play it. When I play Boule of Vogue or something, she just literally looks at me with her mouth open. I thinks I'm doing it with my mouth or something. She can't figure it. She can't do it. But I've written songs, and we won't go into that. But I'd actually, to be honest, if people want to check out there, there are some good songs I wrote, but or co-wrote.
Are they on your website, John? Because I'm going to put a link.
No,
I'm
no,
going
I
to put a
don't.
link under this to your website.
No, I don't. I don't really have, because a few of them have been recorded by artists. You know, Sinead O'Connor even recorded one of my songs, and you know, it's a strange thing. I mean, I
Which
never
one
felt.
was it, John? If you don't mind me asking, just for anyone that maybe wants to check it out,
Yeah,
which
it's a
one
song
did she
called
record?
"Baby, Let Me Buy You a Drink."
Okay.
It's on there. There is a video of it on. It's not a particularly. It's from the Late Late Show. She did it on the Late Late Show, and it's the only time that the media never mentioned. And when they had an opportunity to write about me and her, they passed. So you can make of that what you will.
Yeah.
Have that kind of aspiration to speak, and to be, you know, it's been very flattering sometimes to me, and gratifying that artists, when they meet me, acknowledge that they sense that in me. But I feel that I'm trapped in the wrong medium, because that's where I've had to be for whatever mission I have. I'm not saying it's any big deal. It may be big, it may be little, I don't know. But that's kind of what I feel. That journalism has kind of been my, you know, I've been kind of placed there to do certain things, and I don't know what they are, and I hope I'm doing them. I think I'm doing them, actually.
I think you are. Let me try and answer your question for you. You know, whether or not you like it or not, you're not in the wrong place. And whether or not you feel I would have liked to have been doing something else, I get the, well, let's face it, despite the fact that journalism has been this cage, let's call it a cage. And I'm thinking as you're speaking there, there's a great song by Soundgarden called Rusty Cage, and it talks about I'm going to break my rusty cage and run. You know, I'm picturing you sitting there and behind the bars of journalism, looking through them, seeing playwrights, seeing author. But you've also done those things, musician. You've also done those things, maybe not to the level that you have wanted to. But I would say from my experience talking with you over the years, and from my experience in reading the words that you've written and in conversation with you many, many times, I don't think you're in the wrong place. You know what I mean? You're reaching a lot of people. You've affected a lot of people for the positive, and you still have a lot more to do. And that's where I'm getting back to this urgency. Maybe you're going to have this crazy flourish now where you're going to get to dump out all those concepts, ideas, and novels now in the latter part of your writing life, rather than blowing off earlier on when you were in your 30s or your 40s.
Well, perhaps, Rick, because, you know, I've been very blessed in the last couple of years, because I've been discovered by the most wonderful publisher called Joseph Dindinger, who's in Texas. And he's a wonderful guy. He's absolutely astonishing. I mean, my last publishers were Bloomsbury, who accepted a book I'd written, which is kind of about God and man in a kind of a secular context. If I know that's a contradiction, but it was an attempt to try to identify what had gone wrong in our culture to make God so implausible. That kind of idea. And the book was accepted by Bloomsbury. And then all this other stuff, the attacks by the LGBT goons and all the rest of it happened. And they had to find a way to get out of it. So what they did was, they said it was too long. And they employed a term I've never heard in a literary word before. They employed a cutter. And the cutter cut my book, about 330,000 words out of my book, but gave me not a single note as to what she had actually done. And they sent this back to me as the finished book for publication. And I said, I had no choice. I said, no, I don't understand this book. So So now that book, I hope that it's possible that Joseph will publish it, and I have probably about another maybe 10 more books already written in different forms, which I could finish in the next few years if I put my mind to it, maybe next 5 years. But I would also like to do this but you see, it's a very strange thing, Rick, to have been at the center of a culture for so long, like 30 years anyway, and then to be completely cast out, and cast out not just because you kind of you've passed your sell by or you just run out of things to say or whatever, but because you were just cast out by forces within that didn't like what you were telling them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a weird situation, and it sort of tells you that you're not finished.
Yeah.
All the time it tells you that you're going to have to go back in to
Mm-hmm.
finish this off, that there's a denouement to come, in which in the third act you will return to the battle at the center of the public square. That's what I feel.
The grand finale is yet to come, So I wanna stop. I told you I wasn't going to talk to you for any more than an hour. I've broke my word. It's been an hour and 1 minute and 19 seconds as per now, and I feel I could talk all day and all night about this, but I'm not going to on this occasion, because my motive for doing this was to find out a little bit more about your writing background, your methods of writing, what your aspirations were in terms of being a writer, rather than, we haven't actually talked about the content per se. Let people figure that one out for themselves. There'll be a link underneath this video in the description box to John's Substack page, John Waters Unchained. He also has a website there as well. You'll be able, I would advise you to go and have a browse. Okay, there'll be stuff that catches your eye. Sample some of his writing on his Substack page. There's freely accessible articles that he puts out every week for just anyone to read, and then there's other for subscribers. Darius at the Center, The Week from My Window, fantastic name, and I love your titles, by the way, too. There's a title of a book that you wrote, I think it was the one before the current one, called Give Us Back the Bad Roads.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't read it. I have a rough idea what it's about, but I've already started constructing things in my head about that. I think it's a fantastic title. But anyway,
it is, and I say that in all modesty, because I tried for months to come up with a title for that book, and as John Lennon said, in the end, it was like the apple falling on Newton's head. It just arrived in my head one day. Like, again, maybe the Dorothea Brand method. You know what I mean? Because the unconscious sees your problems.
Yeah.
And if you hold on to them and continue, don't give up on them. Don't come up with a lesser title and settle for that. Then your unconscious will deliver a better one.
And when it arrives, it has that effect of the apple on the cranium. You'll know something's hit you. You'll feel that something's hit. You'll just know that that's right. And even if it sounds a bit odd, right, as long as you know that it's right, and as long as you know that it's the right one, then you just put it out there as your title. John,
it's a funny thing, just on that point. It's a weird thing about my book titles, Eric, that I don't know if this is apropos of anything, but it's a weird thing that there's quite a number of my book titles, and people remember them, but they misremember them. So, for example, my first book, it was called Jiving at the Crossroads. Everybody remembers it as Dancing at the Crossroads, which removes the irony of the title out of it, and they don't notice that. The second, but that last time, Give Us Back the Bad Roads, nobody gets that right. They always say, give us back the old roads.
I got it right though, didn't I?
You did. But it's an interesting, because the distinction is massive between bad and old. The question of bad roads, it's like, because all my life I heard my father and his friends talking about the bad roads of Ireland, and they were affectionate. They loved the bad roads, and to be caught pleading for the return of the bad anything seems like a terrible, mistake.
Yeah.
And yet, you know what it means. The word bad, I'll take the bad roads. I'll take them back.
Yeah.
Take away the rest.
Yeah. See, the reason maybe that's stuck in my head, just to speak out loud, is the places that I went to when I was in Africa. The roads were beyond horrendous. It was like they'd been carpet bombed by the US Air
Yeah,
Force. There were potholes like you've never seen, going for
yeah, I know.
hundreds of miles. You were having to drive zigzag as the crow flies. It would have taken you, 8 hours to drive 100 miles on those roads. And the thing that I always joke with the people, because they always complained about their bad roads. These roads are terrible. The potholes are terrible. I said, listen, you people have sunshine like no one has sunshine on the equator in Kenya, in Uganda. Sun comes up at 6 a.m., sun goes down at 6 p.m. 10 months of the year. It's glorious sunshine, beautiful equatorial sunshine. I said, that's God compensating you for having those bad
You don't
roads.
need
You've got
you,
that sunshine,
you,
right? You're getting
you
something back in return
yeah,
for it,
you don't need roads because you don't need to go anywhere. You've got
Correct.
it all, And I know
So I
that's
don't know. That triggered. Listen, I'm just saying that's what triggered me. That's why
yeah,
that title stuck in my head, even though I haven't read your book. Not
yeah.
that one anyway.
Yeah, that's it. See, people think it's kind of about the EU and the motorways, and that's only
Mhm,
a tiny little element in it. Like there's a whole story about roads and what they
mhm,
mean and our country and it linked up to itself by roads and so on. And so it's a book. It's actually written in the form of a letter in the second person to my father who died in
mhm,
1989, and it's essentially telling him this is what happened to your country while you were
mhm,
away.
mhm. Well, I encourage people, please go and check out John's writing catalog. I'm hoping this won't be the last time we'll have a conversation like this. It's completely different to any conversation that we've had before. Personally speaking, I've enjoyed it immensely. I can't speak for
Me
you,
too.
obviously,
Thank
but
you.
if it hasn't been too traumatic, we will definitely talk again, maybe about music, about there's so many things I'd like to talk to you about, but time is usually our enemy here. So we've got to make the best use of time. So that's what we're doing here. So, listeners, if you've found this to be beneficial, cut and paste the link, share it out with other people, especially if you've been motivated or maybe inspired, maybe to start becoming more creative or to put pen to paper or do whatever it is that you want to do. Leave a message below. And in the meantime, for now anyway, Mr. John Waters, thank you very much. I'm
Thank
Rick
you, Rick.
Munn. This is Volition on YouTube. And for now, I am over and out.